Well, good morning, everybody. All right, as you look at this map that shows the month-to-date precipitation ranks by climate district, I want to kind of give you a preview of what I want to cover today. At the beginning, I'd like to talk a bit about Iowa. And I don't know what happened, but I woke up this morning just thinking about Iowa. I mean, it's our nation's top corn producer. I believe it ranks second in terms of soybean production behind my home state of Illinois. And I don't know, maybe it was the fact that I stayed up way too late last night helping my son build. We're trying to build a striping kit for his mower. And we finally finished up, and it was about midnight, and I couldn't really fall asleep real quick. And so maybe it's because I was watching Caitlin Clark highlight reels last night late. I don't know. But Iowa, I've been thinking a lot about you. And I think some of it comes from, this 2025 drought risk prediction that's come from an Iowa State climatologist for years, Dr. Ellen Taylor. Brilliant scientist, tremendous respect. And I'm just thinking about where you are right now. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about where this pattern's taking us and the rain that we do expect to get into Iowa in the near term. And I want to tell you why I think the second half of June is not going to look like the first half of June. And we're going to make a case for where this long-term forecast is going to go. So there you go. That's what we're going to do. Now, outside of Iowa, extremely wet across parts of the Mid-South, the Southeast, the Northeast, all throughout the month of May. And when you combine this with what happened back in April, honestly, the soils are so saturated in this area, so saturated down here in the Southeast, and in pockets up through the Northeast, that we almost have this secondary effect of moisture supply in the lower atmosphere, which, because of this moisture, reduces Iowa's chances for substantial drought in the summer. Now, it's not a guarantee, but as I mentioned earlier in the week, or maybe it was last week, if there's going to be a massive drought event that's going to hit this section of the United States, it almost always starts with very dry conditions through the Mid-South. And we don't have that this year. What we've got in the Mid-South, the lower Mississippi River Valley, the Southeast, the Red River of the South, we actually have almost a brown ocean effect. Okay, so maybe I was talking with a good friend of mine, Jeff Nally, the other day on the Cromwell Ag Radio Network, and I told him, I said, honestly, I found myself referencing the Mid-South as the Gulf of the Mid-South because of how much moisture is in this soil here. But during this month of May, most of Iowa has been on the drier side of average, as has a lot of Illinois and Indiana. Same thing for parts of northern Missouri versus southern Missouri, which has been exceptionally wet, right? You can see pockets of Wisconsin that have been dry. The Northwest has been very dry. California, which is getting very hot right now, has been dry, although this area is about to get hit with some hurricane moisture. We'll talk more about that in a second. And we continue to see the East showing up wet in all of our forecasts. So we look at all of this and just try to assess something, and I've just kind of picked an epicenter of all of it, Iowa, to go through. And it's just because last year, when we were getting to this point in May, we were in the middle of an incredibly long stretch of just flooding. While we watched the eastern Corn Belt settle into drought over by Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, we saw, what was the name of that tropical system? Oh, my goodness, I forgot. But whatever, the one that came up into, early into parts of eastern Texas. Too many names to remember here. And then the drought and the heat that was building into the west at that time. I mean, we had several places in the Midwest, upper Midwest, western Corn Belt, having their wettest, mid to late spring into early summer time frame. And then it all flipped over by the end of the season. We talked about this on Wednesday, right? We just saw the entire pattern flip for an incredibly dry fall. And what's interesting about all of that is you can still see that's last fall's 100 centimeter soil moisture percentile map, which just represents the depth of that drought. We can still see in parts of Nebraska, Iowa, northern Missouri versus southern. Look at the difference here. Also, same thing for northern Illinois versus southern. You can see that last fall's drought is still evident. There's still deficits down there. Wow, this whole region is saturated, and that's your brown ocean effect right there. Now, normally that's a term that was coined and reserved for a southern tip of Florida, okay, around the Everglades, but it's just something I want to consider as we go forward. Now, there's another thing I've been thinking about with Iowa, and I'm going to show you the National Weather Service's All Hazards Weather Map. You see me make this map. They make this data publicly available. Our tax dollars pay for it, so I grab it and map it. But they have their own map here as well. And what I like about theirs is theirs isn't static like mine. So you can actually click on it and go get local forecast data. So let's just do this. All right, we can see the heat, west, all in these areas. This is all air quality. I'll tell you about that in just a few moments. We've got some flood issues here. But I want to come back to Iowa for a moment. And I'm just going to start drilling into the map. So if you just click on this, again, this is weather.gov. I'm curious about Des Moines. I don't know, let's just pick on a city. Let's pick on Des Moines. You can come in here and get your forecast. But I'm going to take you a step back up. So come over here and click with me on Des Moines, Iowa. And then I want you to come over here to the Climate and Past Weather tab. If you just hover over it and then click it, you'll be taken to this. So the National Weather Service has their own API service, which comes from ACIS. And I'm going to leave this on the Des Moines area. In fact, let's blow this up. Sorry, that's kind of small. I'm going to leave this on the Des Moines area. And I'm going to come down here to these radio buttons and click Accumulation Graphs. And there was a comment left on the YouTube videos. I don't remember if it was yesterday at Matt's video or earlier in the week on mine about Iowa and their long-standing water issues. So I'm going to take you back to the year 2020, January 1, and go up to today, looking at total cumulated precipitation. And I don't want it to reset. I just want to see the cumulative precip over that time frame. It's pretty amazing to see this. 2020 we were a little drier, but 2021 built the drought, 22 continued it, 23 continued it. Even that wet weather right in through there in 2024 was not enough to make up for the previous year's deficits. And where we currently stand at the very end of this, we can hover over it and see that if normal would have been 195 inches of accumulation since January 1 of 2020, we are at 167. And what's interesting about that is nearly, add another 10 inches to it, and we're talking about a full year's worth of precipitation that's missing over this time frame. And the reason why I stress all of this is because this precipitation variability, since 2021, which has been so high, this is actually something that Dr. Elwin Taylor talked about in many of his talks over the years, especially post-2012. He was anticipating, although he used an entirely different method than I would use to arrive at that conclusion, he was anticipating that this time frame, 23, 24, 25, and 26, was going to have highly variable precipitation. And by God, he's got it. I mean, we've seen this over this time frame. Now, we know that the new seasonal drought outlook, this will be updated soon, by the way, but the one that was released in middle of May continues to place this risk in this region back into Montana for drought development. We don't expect major drought relief, I think, until we get fully into the monsoon season down here in the southwest, although the big moisture surge from the tropical system coming out of the East Pacific is going to hit this region. But I bring all this up because you've seen these with me, right? We've looked at these and examined them. That's the July, August, September precipitation outlook from NOAA. And you can find similar forecasts from the ECMWF and also from the National Multi-Model Ensemble. And even we can construct some historical analogs based off ocean temperatures and other things. And we find this risk in the midsection of the country of being dry, hot and dry. And it's just, it's a worrisome forecast. Now, has the risk of drought been reduced because of spring? Absolutely. At the beginning of the year, I talked about it on Wednesday, right? I thought, man, that northward retreat of the jet stream was going to have a major effect on putting in high pressure here sooner than it did. I just think that the can has been kicked down the road on when this might happen. So maybe that's why I was thinking about Iowa early this morning. I'm not sure. But I wanted to get that out of my head before we get started today, all right? Now, here's the last piece to this. This is what our ongoing discussion has been. The flow of the atmosphere, all right, it's a major control of the skin temperature of the ocean. And when the atmosphere isn't pushing against it, you tend to redistribute. I'm talking about, pushing against it horizontally, not up and down. You tend to allow for the ocean to do a better job of upwelling. And so what's been interesting is all of this. Now, the hurricane season discussion is going to come out of that, okay? But this cold water that's sitting here is a part of that negative PMM phase. The large Pacific warm pool here and the risk of going colder there could help redistribute, or let me rephrase that. The redistribution of pressure systems, specifically the Pacific high, could, in fact, impact these ocean temperatures. And ultimately, that's why we look at the ocean temperatures. They tend to be a bit more of a steady script, if you will, around the behavior of the atmosphere than the chaotic behavior day-to-day of the atmosphere. So this is what we're watching. In Iowa, your risk right now is coming from this area. It will get much greater if this region goes over cold. And it's got to be cold in the next 30 days. I mean, that's the only way to say it. That region right there has got to get watched. I'll watch it and keep you up to date on this. Okay, so back to that all hazards weather map. This is what happens when I make a map out of it. And I want to talk to you about a couple of areas. Okay, very wet conditions here. You're going to pay close attention to that. We have the heat advisories that are out west. It's getting extremely hot, but that's not going to last too terribly long. And then we got the air quality issues up north. And the air quality issues are from these wildfires in Canada, which we've looked at for the past few days. This was back on the 28th. Just look toward the sunset at just the size and magnitude of these fires. They're north of the Canadian Prairie, but the smoke is moving all the way down into the lower 48. And there you can see the heat signatures overnight, the sun rising. This was yesterday. Just looking on the 29th at that wildfire smoke. And you can almost see the stagnant behavior of the atmosphere as the smoke swirls this way and that. One day pulling out of the flow out of the north, the next day out of the south, like you see here. And all the way, oh gosh, look at that last night. In fact, we had a couple of areas, one here and one there, of some pyrocumulus. And then there's the fires last night. And just as the sun was rising this morning, we can see that smoke. I was watching it also using the high-resolution rapid refresh model. This is just their vertically integrated smoke product. It is a research product. It is not an operational product, but what we're looking at here is just where that smoke may go. Now, in 2023, it was Canadian wildfire smoke in the Midwest that kept temperatures 5 degrees cooler than average throughout the May and June dryness that hit this region. And I'll be honest, we've not been able to get our temperatures very hot at all in the Midwest, in the Northeast this year, but it's not been because of smoke. It's actually just been because of the ridge placement out in the Pacific Ocean. That's a major contributor to it. But that's just what we're expecting in terms of where that smoke is going to go here over the next 48 hours or so. So this will be thick in the upper atmosphere. It's going to give an interesting kind of tinge to the upper atmosphere, probably give us some very brilliant sunsets as well. All right, from there, I do want to look at yesterday's satellite data for the whole rest of the country because we have once again had extremely deep convection right down here in parts of the southwestern United States into Mexico. It's interesting, you can see the wave that's through the Baja that's ahead of the tropical system Alvin, which is way down here off the screen. We had some central Florida thunderstorms which were needed. Heavy rains moved through parts of the southeast, and we're going to watch this frontal boundary and through here and eventually create quite a bit of wet conditions over in parts of Virginia, Maryland, and other pockets of the mid-Atlantic. But those storms down south, which I loved Matt's analysis of the three-body scattering in the big hailstorm that went through Austin yesterday. But I just want to show you, this has been how the week has gone for the Southern Plains. That's a 7-day map of the maximum estimated hail size from the MRMS data set, which is curated from our radar network. And it's just amazing just to see that we had some big hail. You can match up the colors if you want. Just incredible to see that. Our storms this morning, just to take a quick look, here they are. We have more storms going through southern Texas, but there's again, they kind of stretch up into parts of Arkansas, some over here in Kentucky and Tennessee, and some off the coast. And we're going to watch that frontal boundary there move forward and give us this risk of some heavy rains. You can see it in today's excessive rainfall outlook from NOAA. Slight risk across a broad area and severe thunderstorm risk from parts of Virginia all the way down through parts of Alabama, southeastern Alabama. Over the weekend, right now, the Storm Prediction Center is not looking at major areas on Saturday and Sunday, but again, we'll keep a close eye on a couple of these pockets for more severe storms. So let's go have a look at the wind field right now, and this is what we've got. So this is the Pacific high. Here's a couple of lows stacked up north of it. We can see the Bermuda high is quite expansive over here. We need to talk more about that later. But there we go. This is our tropical system that Matt's been talking about all week. Matt is a gifted tropical atmospheric scientist, and so I always love to hear what he has to say. Andrew, his major skill set is understanding severe convection. Just brilliant young scientists. I'm privileged to be able to work with those guys. But we did finally get the naming of the system. There it is, Alvin. It is still a tropical storm as of early this morning. Sustained winds about 45 miles per hour. It's expected to get up to tropical storm status and, maintain tropical storm status and move its way toward the Baja. That's at least the current forecast of where this is expected to go. Now, there's been some rumblings and some discussion about the risk of an early June tropical event that may get into the Caribbean or the Gulf. That happens some years, but the latest updated forecast from the European model on the probability, so the chance of getting tropical development in this area, right now it's very, very low. It's off not even registering. So we have Alvin here, and then we have the system that could possibly follow it, which would be right in through here. Now, we need to see where Alvin's moisture is going to go. I found this quite interesting. I ran the high split model this morning just to see where, going about a mile above our heads, where that flow will end up over the next 10 days. So you can see Alvin here. Some of it moves across Mexico. Some of it moves up into the southwest. But what's interesting is this whole pattern we're in right now where we've gained momentum again, right? We've spent a long time talking about the loss of momentum, these brief gains, and then the loss of momentum again. Well, the gain in momentum is such that right now air that is in Alvin 10 days from now could be in Europe. That's fascinating to see. And what we're going to be paying close attention to is Alvin's moisture. Now let's use the high-res NAM to get a glimpse as to where this might be. And let me get this queued up to where we are now. Not a bad initialization. We know there are storms right here. There's a storm in parts of Kentucky, Tennessee. So good representation early this morning in the models. And as we play this forward, take a look at this coming through Mexico, which has been in drought. And we watch the one system curl up through the mid-Atlantic. By tonight, early tomorrow morning, there's your flood risk here. And we're going to watch the moisture from Alvin kind of start to split. I mean, you can see pieces of Alvin are going this way, and some of it's going here. Meanwhile, tomorrow afternoon on Saturday, we are watching this area in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas for more stronger thunderstorms, and some of them could have straight-line wind issues and more hail. But Alvin on the backside is going to start to feed in some moisture into this. So look at that squall line possibly going over the Red River Valley of the South in the overnight hours on Saturday into early Sunday morning. We'll watch out for that. But there it is. There's Alvin. And I just want to show you where I think Alvin's moisture could end up going. Let's go ahead and have a look at, as Matt showed the other day, what the ECMWF is looking at in terms of that precipitable water. So keep an eye on it right here. This is Alvin. So as we play this forward, there's the surge by Saturday night into Sunday, moving its way into Southern California. You saw that. Some of the moisture is getting through parts of Mexico. And then what we're going to keep an eye on is next Monday, Tuesday. Did this help enhance and open up this larger area of moisture transport ahead of this low that's ripping through here? And I want to see that. While what looks like maybe the remnants of Alvin's circulation, maybe that's part of Alvin, is sitting off the coast of California. Now, what's interesting about moisture in the atmosphere when we look at it like this is it will show you the enhancement right in through here from that brown ocean effect I mentioned where the soils are so saturated. That's by next Wednesday. You can see the front clearing this all out, but we quickly recover that Gulf moisture again by Friday, June 6th into Saturday, June 7th, 8th, and 9th. And this one, some of the models are predicting, high instability with this. So staying with the European model here, let's flip this over to, I tell you what, let's go ahead and run the precipitation type and intensity forecast, and then I'm going to show you some anomalies. All right, so using this morning just the European model, there's the wet weather, very wet weather that's moving into parts of the mid-Atlantic. You can now see Alvin, there it is, pushing right up into this area. Some of Alvin's moisture contributing to this region of the Four Corner states and the moisture that's coming out of the plains. When are we in time? This is Monday. So as big area of high pressure settles into the Carolinas and Virginia, we're going to see opening up the Gulf here. And by next Tuesday, a long frontal boundary here with some Alvin moisture in it. And that frontal boundary is going to go right through Iowa, which needs a rain. It's going to come through parts of Missouri, which southern Missouri doesn't. Most of Illinois does. Indiana does. Michigan does. So this is a very important front on June the 4th sneaking through here. And yeah, we're looking at the possibility of some snow at the high elevations of the Rocky Mountains. Playing it on through, this wet weather gets all the way into the southeast. And then remember, we have another system that's coming out there on the 6th and 7th, that's next Saturday, that could be in the northern plains. Models have been very consistent with the development of this thing. Matt talked a bit about it yesterday. What we don't know is how soon or easily it's going to open up the Gulf of Mexico moisture again. So you see that it's just the low is here, and it's trying to open up that Gulf moisture, maybe tapping into a little bit more out of the Gulf of the Mid-South. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that. I don't mean anything by it other than it's just how it is. It's just so much moisture. Okay, Eric, after all of that, what do we need to arrive? We need to arrive here. That's your next 5 days precipitation anomalies, and here's the next 10. That's the next 7. This is day 4 through 7. That's June 3rd through June 9th, and all of the days, there's all the next 10 days. And as Matt found yesterday, look at this little interesting striping action to this. It's just a byproduct of the way these systems are going through. The Northwest stays very dry. In fact, the temperatures are about to crank there very soon. But I find that fascinating. And if you're curious how much, let's just go ahead and use the European model and get a good gauge on this. So let's play through this weekend. That's through Sunday into Monday. So already starting Monday night to Tuesday, Wednesday, that's when that first system comes through. By Thursday, there's your precip totals. Then we have the system the following weekend. This would be June 7th, 8th, and 9th that comes through it again. And the 10-day Euro keeps the Mid-South problems going, adds more moisture to the Midwest. And you're saying, Eric, there's been this discussion of drought. Where is it? And it's not now. You can see it as clearly as I can. And the second system out here, we've been tracking it with several things. And I just want to show you this. The Pacific High is expected to move here. Now, that's going to have a huge implication on the West. More on that in a second. The Bermuda High is located there, but technically close enough to continue to open the Gulf for moisture. The jet runs over the top of this and comes down and do something like that. And we need to see what that might mean overall for this beginning of June timeframe versus the end. And I'm going to get to that end in just a few seconds. So here's what I'm watching. This is the actual animation of what you just saw there. And it's kind of neat. There's Alvin, okay, getting pulled into the southwest. I see now. I was wrong. That little circulation there is just a cutoff low. Not Alvin. Sorry about that. But there's the big Pacific High. Now, back to Iowa. If I were going to be having a discussion with you about Iowa drought in June, the Pacific High can't be here. It's got to be way over there. That's history for you. That's what history would tell me. Because what that would do, that would flip-flop. You'd bring this trough over here. The ridge would go over there. So the jet would dip here, ridge out over the central United States, and dip east. And I'd be talking about high pressure dominating this area. And we've got none of that. So early next week, this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's the first trough. Now watch. Here's that second one. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, sneaking through. And while we've got flow like this will likely bring fronts through, initiating changes in temperature and also bringing in the chance for precip. So it is not early June that drought's going to develop on this crop. This crop may struggle to get a whole lot of extra heat. There's some coming, but I'm just thinking about the midsection of the country here. But to make a point, this is the new week 2 forecast from all of the models. And let's just take a look at the Euro specifically. See that system it's got coming through there? No slowdown at all in this area, but better moisture here still into that week 2 time frame. Okay, one last thing to think about. Total chances through the midway part of June of getting another inch. There you go. This is the probability of getting another 2 inches between now and the middle of June. And that corridor just continues to stay extremely wet. Now, we talked on Wednesday. There is a distinct possibility that this flip-flops. But right now, it's not happening. And if you're curious, parts of Oklahoma along the Red River into Arkansas, the chances of getting 4 inches of rain in the next 15 days is around 50 to 70%. So with all that, let's talk temperatures before I give you this long range. It has been a cold finish to the month, right? So since about the 18th, we've watched temperatures across the northern tier of the United States dipping down here to make it a top 5 coolest. Meanwhile, southern Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. I mean, just take a look at how hot it's been. Central Florida, hottest May on record. We know we're about to cool this off with some cloud cover over here, but my goodness, look at the disparity in temperatures across the country. There is no frost risk, which is nice. I'm tired of talking about that, but let's take a look at what these high temperatures are going to do. So here's today, getting into tomorrow. Look at the heat in the Central Valley, moving into eastern Oregon, into parts of Montana. The Midwest, you're going to start to build in your heat on the weekend. That's Sunday into Monday. We need every bit of this to get on this crop, given how dry it's been, while cooler air exits east. This is all cloud cover dominated from Alvin. And as we go forward, that's next Tuesday, Wednesday. That's the first frontal boundary that comes back through and knocks the temperatures off there while heat builds into the northeast. Then we'll have a second frontal boundary that passes through on next weekend. All right, June 7th, 8th, and 9th. To just show you that, this is the next 5 days of temperatures compared to average. This is day 5 through 10. And there's day 10 through 15. And you may have noticed something. Because of the proximity of that large Pacific high that's here, a lot of the West Coast is experiencing very warm conditions for a while as we go forward. And we're thinking hard about what that might mean in the month of, here in the month of May getting into June, because of the ocean temperature pattern in the North Pacific, which is an area that we've been watching carefully. Over the last 7 days, look at this. That area has warmed up. We still have the negative PMM signal, but that area has warmed up. And if we put high pressure over the top of it, like you just saw when I gave you that 15-day kind of longer term view, that's something that we can't ignore, that high pressure cell right there. So given that area has warmed up and we're watching it to see if it cools off, we've got other questions to ask, because it's not the only control, it's just a bigger one. And our questions all week, in fact, for the last several weeks, have been around the MJO. Right? Matt talked about it. We're thinking about this. Is the MJO going to really make this move? It's starting to show up in both the weeklies, which are these, and the 15-day forecast, which is over here on the left. Now, that move has been easily seen if we just go have a look at the Hofmuller diagrams. And this is a fast transition. I'm looking at the slope of these two lines I'm drawing. And by the way, this is why some folks are talking about maybe the risk of something brewing in the Caribbean or in the Gulf in terms of tropical systems. But that slant is a bit too much to be qualified as just a full MJO kind of cyclical motion across the Indian Ocean into the Pacific. It's too fast. That's why we keep calling it a convectively coupled Kelvin wave. They can move faster. But what this tells me, all right, is that the weather patterns I just described to you for the front half of June will likely not look at all like the second half of June because of this. And I've got some evidence for that. Take a look at the newest CFSV2 forecast for June 13 through 19 and June 20 through 26th, where I'm bringing in moisture now. We're drier over that time frame. See it? The forecast is staying wetter in the southeast. This is the second half of June. And that same forecast is being echoed by the European model, which, as Matt talked about earlier, we're watching the position of these large subtropical highs late in June. Does the Bermuda high drift? Does the Pacific high start to move away from where it is expected to be now to over here by the time we get to the end of June? If it does, okay, that's going to leave the midsection of the country a bit in the lurch. And this is what it does. Let's go have a look. I'm going to zoom in, if you don't mind, just into the U.S. You can see the Canadian prairie as well. And I want to do precipitation, but we're going to do this kind of week by week. So here we go. That's the first week now, okay? That's week 2. We talked about that big system. That's one that comes through, next weekend. But then watch what happens after this. The wet weather settles by mid-month into the southeast. There's something going on down here. You can see it, okay? I got to keep an eye on that. That's that mid-June risk for something tropical. And then you get here. That's June 19th through the 21st. And do you start to see how the models are drying this out and maybe bringing in some ridge runners over the top of this, meeting into some tropical moisture that's down here in the southeast? That's very similar to what you just saw. There's some sort of a dry signal that's here anchored back into the north and west. And that is why I think the second half of June does not look like the front half of June based upon some of these model forecasts. So here's the big picture. Let's just wrap this up with one thing. All of this is ultimately related to the motion of the atmosphere with respect to the rotation of the Earth. And I'm going to show you now a graphic that looks back over a long time frame, all the way back to last June. And I want you to look at the bottom. The colors on the top can be difficult to discern, but the bottom is where the story is. After all of that extremely wet weather in June, the momentum fell out of the pattern, and it stayed relatively low except for a quick bump up in July. But look at this. August, September, October, November, what were we doing? We were coming out of the basement in terms of atmospheric momentum and slowly regaining it. And guess what happened in November? Do you remember how wet November was last year for much of the central U.S.? There you go. We got into a winter where it was just all over the place. And then starting in February, if you just kind of take a smoothing algorithm to this, we've dropped. And we've made this brief return right now. And I want to know, does this come back down and we try to recover again for the rest of summer? If I've drawn that right, then we have to think about Iowa. And the reason is Iowa may be, if I've drawn that right, where did I put that? Way back here. There it is. That would make this correct. So that's what I'm thinking about. Maybe I just need to get a little bit more rest. Maybe tomorrow I'll wake up thinking about Montana. I don't know. But I hope you all have a good rest of your week and weekend. Be safe. We'll talk next Monday. Thanks.